Hey, fam. What's the first thing that comes to mind when I say Josiah Henson? Nothing? What about Uncle? Uncle Tom, huh? Let's go on a little history excursion. Because I want to tell you about the real Uncle Tom, a.k.a. Josiah Henson. Remember Uncle Tom's Cabin?
Ice in my veins, I've been driving this train. Years in this lane, there's no stopping this flame. Cause I came.
Uncle Tom's Cabin debuted in the era on June 5th, 1851, and it ran in 41 weekly installments over the Noteworthy to be mentioned, Uncle Tom's Cabin debuted in the era on June 5th, 1851, and it ran in 41 weekly installments over the following 10 months, and immediately grabbed the capital city attention. The paper's subscriber base grew up by 26%, and an estimated 50,000 people read Stowe's story in serial form, spurring John P. Jewett and Company to publish it as a novel in 2 volumes of 312 pages. Now, I will tell you this. Let me share a little bit of my history. Now, let me tell you, far beautiful family. Growing up in the public schools of Gary, Indiana, I was fortunate enough to be blessed to have great teachers that came from the civil rights era, teachers that knew what it was to struggle, teachers that taught not just what was in the history books, but real life history, teachers who were living history, Vietnam War veterans. Well, actually, before they were even veterans, I've seen friends, older brothers, go to Vietnam to receive that letter, that draft letter. And I just like to share just a few of I would just like to share a few of my teachers who were influential to where I am today. I want to point out my social studies teacher. I had a social studies teacher who went on to Congress. Her name was Katie Hall. Please Google her. Katie Hall. You know, she got into some trouble, but hey, she was a fantastic teacher. Fantastic social studies teacher. Okay? Up next, I had a French teacher, black French teacher. She had like a pixie cut, chocolate dark skin, just beautiful, glowing dark skin, chocolate dark skin. And her name was Miss Petrie. I don't know, I can't remember if she was married or not, but Miss Petrie, Petrie. She taught French, and she was fluent, of course, in French. And I still remember some of the beginning lessons in her class because she was just an awesome teacher, not only in her appearance, but the way she was able to teach us children another language in junior high school. And let me tell you, last but not least, I had a principal. I went to Gary Westside Senior High School. My principal, Quentin P. Smith, was one of the original black white school principal in Gary Westside High from 75 to 79 was Quentin P. Smith. Whoa, did he stand tall. The gangsters didn't even mess with him. Okay, look him up. Quentin P. Smith. He was a bombardier. A bombardier. You heard of the Tuskegee Airmen? Look him up. Quentin P. Smith. He was a principal at Gary Westside High School, I believe now. Gary Airport is named after him, or he had some type of recognition there. But throughout my school years, throughout my military years, especially my born near Port Tobacco, Maryland, around 1789, Henson's first memory was of his father being whipped, having his ear cut off, and cold South start again. Born near Port Tobacco, Maryland, around 1789, Henson's first memory was of his father being whipped, having his ear cut off, and sold south, all as a punishment for striking a white man who had attempted to rape his wife. He never saw his father again. Henson was later separated from his mother and sold to a child trafficker, but soon fell deathly ill. The slave trader offered the boy to Henson's mother's owner, an alcoholic gambler named Isaac Riley, for a bargain, free of charge if the young Henson died, a barter of some horseshoeing worth if he survived. But he did recover, and Henson and his mother were enslaved about 12 miles from Washington, D.C. on Riley's plantation. He endured countless beatings as a child, especially after an ill-fated attempt to learn to read. Henson had great strength and leadership ability, and eventually became Riley's market man in the nation's capital. As the person in charge of selling all his master's farm produce, he rubbed shoulders with eminent lawyers, businessmen, and learned the skills of running a business. Despite the fact that he wouldn't learn to read until much later in life, Henson also became a great preacher, memorizing verses and relying on his eloquence and natural sense of humor to connect with parishioners. A white minister convinced him to secretly raise money to purchase his own freedom while traveling between the Riley family farms. The minister arranged for churches to host Henson and raised $350 toward his emancipation. But Riley swindled him out of the money and tried to sell him south to New Orleans. Henson narrowly escaped, boarding that harsh fate, though, a highly provincial twist of events. Riley's nephew, Amos, the young man tasked with selling Henson, contracted malaria. Rather than letting the son die, Henson loaded him on a steamship and returned north in 1830. Henson ran away with his wife and two youngest children. They walked more than 600 miles to Canada. Once in a new land, Henson helped start in 1841 a freeman settlement called the British American Institute, in an era called Dawn, which became known as one of the final stops on the Underground Railroad. Henson repeatedly returned to the U.S. to guide 118 other slaves to freedom. It was a massive, dangerous undertaking, but Henson saw a greater purpose than simply living out his life in Ontario, Canada. In addition to his service to the school, Henson ran a farm, started a grist mill, bred horses, and built a sawmill for high-quality black lumber. So good, in fact, that it won him a medal at the first World Fair in London 10 years later. Before the Civil War, Henson frequently traveled unhindered between Ontario and Boston, where he often preached. During one such trip, Henson befriended the abolitionist Samuel Atkins Eliot, a former mayor of Boston and state legislator. Eliot would serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. Impressed with Henson, Eliot offered to pen the story of his life in a memoir. That book, titled The Life of Josiah Henson, formerly a slave, now an inhabitant of Canada, as narrated by himself, was published in early 1849. Henson's book generated attention at the abolitionist reading room in Boston, as well as like-minded households throughout the North. On one of his trips home from Boston, Henson made a detour to a woman who was about to write about a book of her own, as a later edition of Henson's memoir recalls. It was in the presence of Mrs. Harriet Beecher Stowe, Andover, Massachusetts, in the year of 1849. But in March of 1851, Stowe wrote and published the story details the journey of two enslaved laborers on the precipice of being sold off by their owner, a Kentucky farmer in arrears. One named Harry flees with his mother Eliza to the north, eventually ending up in Canada, with the other, Uncle Tom, is transported down the Mississippi River, where he is eventually sold to a vicious Louisiana plantation owner. Tom's faith nearly falters, but a pair of visions places him back on firm ground. After encouraging two women to escape north, Tom is beaten to death when he refuses to reveal where they've gone. An attempt by Tom's original owner to purchase Tom back arrives too late. Upon returning to Kentucky, the farmer's son sets out all of his late father's enslaved free. The farmer's son sets all of his late father's enslaved free, encouraging them to remember Tom's sacrifice whenever they see his cabin.